Which one of these people is the person actually talking? Well, hey there. Welcome back. I want to share something with you that I can't help but laugh at. And as you know, I'm all about time, energy, and resources. I'm all about the calendar. I'm all about what time means in our life, what energy means in our life, and what resources means in our life. And to me, it's very important that you guard that closely because that's all you have. So here's my story. A long time ago, I was doing consulting work for a rather large healthcare organization. And I was doing computer stuff for them, and I would go into their offices and I would help them with this thing. I had a specific task one day, and it just so happened that a lot of the people that were on my list to help were in a conference call, in the same conference call. So I'd come in their office and I'd see that they're on the phone, and I'd say, oh, sorry. And they'd say, oh, no, come on in, come over here, And I'd look and realize that they had it on mute. And the person on the other side of the conference call was speaking animatedly. And I should back up a little bit. This was before Zoom and all the other video stuff was so prevalent. So everyone just had a conference call on their telephone and had nothing to do with their computer. So I'd help them out with this task and so forth. And sometimes they actually have like a little bit of a personal chat with me. And then all of a sudden they'd say, oh, hold on a second. And they would unmute it and say, yes, I agree with that. And then they would remute it and then continue talking. And then I'd go on my merry way. And I'd go to the next person, and the next person, and the next person. And then after a while, I thought, wait, no one's listening, because every single person was doing the same thing. They had it on mute. They were doing something else online unrelated. And in some cases, it was not even something related to work. Some of them were shopping and so forth. They were all more than happy to have me in their office. They were all more than happy to have a conversation with me. And at least a few of them were more than happy to have a non-work related conversation to pull me into. But the point was that they would all unmute the phone at some point and say a couple words and then mute it. So I thought, which one of these people is the person actually talking? No one's listening to this person. The time being spent on this call, and I think it was at least a half-hour conference call, and I'll get to how I know that, which means you multiply a half hour by every single person in the call, and that's how much time is being wasted. And if you want to get into energy, I mean, it's kind of draining and frustrating to be in a conference call that you're not even listening to while you're doing a number of things. You're distracting yourself, or you're intentionally switching gears and multitasking. And as I've said in my multitasking episode, multitasking isn't really a good thing. So listen to that episode to see why I feel that way. More than one person showed me their calendar, and it was actually related to what I was doing. And in looking in the calendar, I realized their entire calendar was full. It was just full. And now, this was a few years ago. And since then, I think it's sort of caught on to block off some time for you. Which sounds silly, right? When you're working, you block off time for you, but we'll get to that. But the important thing was that these blocks of time were meetings. So an entire day, an entire week was meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting. So let's talk about that. When you have a meeting, it's assumed that you're meeting with other people because you're making a decision. You are working on a project. You are somebody who is a facet of the project as a whole, of the group as a whole, right? You can imagine it's as much an art as it is a science to get a number of people together to work together towards a common goal, and that them spending their time together, crafting it so that that time they're spending, that every minute is actually useful, right? I'm sure you've been in more than one meeting in which you're like, well, I'm done here. I said my piece. This is all I need. I don't care what Karen and Jill say, because what they're working on really doesn't affect me, and so forth, right? So the broader picture here is having someone who's part of a meeting again and again and again and again. And that takes a toll on not only your time, but your energy, because you're saying, okay, yes, we're going to do this. Okay. So I actually took someone aside, one of these people, and they were actually a director. And I said, your calendar is absolutely full. And she said, yeah, it's pretty much meetings Monday through Friday. And some of them overlap. And sometimes I double book and then I have to remove one. And I asked a very naive question. I said, when do you have the time to do the things you promised to do in the meetings? And she said, wow, that's a good question. I don't know. I just really never thought about that. I guess I'd like you to think about that as well. So hopefully you have 3 takeaways from what I just told you. First of all, before the takeaways, I hope you're reflecting on any meetings you may have. Depending on what you do for a living, you may be a slave to that screen. You may be a slave to the calendar that stares at you all day long, and you say, okay, I'll put that on there, I'll put that on there, I'll put that on there. And that's actually another discussion and perhaps another episode about your relationship with your calendar. But right now, I want to give you 3 takeaways. When you're committing your time and energy to something that's a group project in some way, shape, or form, whether you're part of a group, a committee, what have you, a conference call, be mindful of what you are doing for the group as a whole. And equally mindful of what the group is doing for you. Because it's unfair to you to use up an hour of your time and energy. And let's be realistic, in your resources, because if you're doing that for an hour, you're not doing something else. I understand that may be impractical. Sometimes you just can't say, hey, I'm just going to raise my hand. I'm going to bow out now because none of this stuff affects me. And this is all I can do for you. And hopefully I've been helpful. Thank you. Because the group won't want that, because they'll want you to listen to them the way that hopefully they listen to you. And again, this becomes a greater logistics challenge, one that I would love to tackle for you, but that's another thing. And 2, as I've said many times, a lot of times people think the equation is time when it's really energy. You may have a block of time on your calendar, but you have to consider the energy that you have as well. And we do that. We actually do that subconsciously. That happens an awful lot in our brains, and we don't even think about it. And you go, yeah, I don't know if that's going to work. Anytime you think about an answer to somebody where they say, hey, can you do this for me, or can we put this on your calendar? And you know you have the time, but you have hesitation. It's because your brain is saying, you know what, I don't know if we have the energy for that. I'm just going to be tired after meeting 1 to do meeting 2. I don't know if I'm going to be in the right frame of mind. I'm going to be all meetinged out or peopled out and want to be an introvert. So be mindful of the energy required for that. Because if you're like me, you want to give your all. You want to give the best person that you can be for everything you do. That can be exhausting, understandably so. And 3, understand the balance between the promises of doing and the actual doing. Another podcast episode that I did was, are you in love with success? But then talking about was inserted before success. So are you in love with talking about success? And I find that a lot of these meetings that this healthcare client had were about, I guess, talking about success. And honestly, in my history, I had a connection in which we were meeting consistently about something that we were going to do. Let's call it a partnership. And I realized we were just talking about it. That's all we were doing, was talking about it. And that's covered in that episode. So be mindful of the cause and effect of your calendar. Okay, I'm going to do the cause is, hey, we're going to do this together and this and this and this. Okay, great. And the effect, when do we do the work? So be mindful of the time, energy, and resources that spring out of this promise you make. And it's kind of like the opposite or the flip side of the coin of the way that my coaching works, which is Goals spring forth out of what we discuss out of your balance sheet. And what that means is that we talk about your desires, we talk about what you're currently doing with your time, energy, and resources, and then we talk about the goals, and the goals just kind of come out of that. And it's actually a really cool, exciting thing. And that's also what we're talking about on your calendar, where you put something on your calendar and you have a discussion or a meeting or what have you, and then something springs forth out of that. A goal, hopefully, comes out of that. But you have to allow time, energy, and resources for the completion of that goal. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. So maybe you shouldn't have had that meeting. Maybe you shouldn't have 7 meetings in a day, because 7 meetings in one day could literally be weeks worth of work. And I'm not telling you not to be productive. I know I've told you a lot in this episode, and I've kind of gone over my time, so I apologize, but something as simple as meetings can have such grand ramifications on your energy. It's just amazing. So when you agree to meetings, and I understand as part of your job, there is no not agreeing to meetings, right? But when you agree to meetings, understand what that means for your future self. This is such a simple concept. We think time is linear, but these permutations that happen from a simple meeting, which could sprout 6 other meetings, which could sprout 6 other tasks and things like that. And then all of a sudden you have a month's worth of work because you said, okay, in a meeting that you probably shouldn't have had. I understand that I may be talking to someone who has a position that is fairly linear with fairly linear things, whether it's sales or accounting or banking or what have you. It may be linear in that a lot of what I'm saying may not affect you all that. But remember that we put things on our calendar that might not be in our calendar. We put it in our calendar in our head. And we say, yeah, we're going to do that. So before I start diluting and rambling on this concept, I hope this makes sense, and I really, really hope that it saves you some frustration and some time, because if you take one thing to heart of what I just said, I literally could save you a month's worth of frustration. And if I do that, I'm thrilled, and that's why I keep doing this. So, thank you.
Living life every day, late at night, not okay. All I want, and I pray, all I need are some better days.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed it, I'd appreciate a like, share, or subscribe. Feel free to reach out, and better days.
Not okay, all I want, and I pray, all I need are some better days.